morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening from where else you're dialing from. My name is Michelle. I am the Innovation Product Manager at Fluke Health Solutions, and it's an honor to be here today as your moderator and have this amazing discussion about predicting the future, what's to come. Let's see if we have a crystal ball and we can predict the new trends in the biomed shop. It's an honor, like I said, to be surrounded by this team of experts. And we hope that today you have many takeaways and many actions that you can apply to your biomed shop today. Before we get started, I would like to ask for our panelists to please introduce themselves. We're going to be going by the alphabetical order because I don't want to play favorites. So we're going to start with Ben. If you would please introduce yourself, it would be great. Maybe say where you're dialing in from and share a little bit about your expertise with us.
Yes, hello. Thank you, Michelle. I'm Ben Roberts. As you can see here, I have my CBET, and I'm a current board member on the Washington State Biomed Association. I have over 30 years in the electronic industry, and about half of that has been with the biomed. In my career as a biomed, I have been a technician, a supervisor, a hiring manager, and a system administrator. Currently, I am the faculty for the biomed program at North Seattle College's electronic department. Multiple roles in the biomed industry, and currently, as I said, I'm teaching at North Seattle.
Awesome. Thank you, Ben. Jamie, you're up next.
I'm Jamie Spradgis. I'm the National Modality Manager for Philips Healthcare based out of Nashville, Tennessee. I'm CBET, got my CBET in 2012, and I'm a second-generation biomed. My dad was biomed under the OEM space and the STERIS space, and I kind of followed along and been in all spaces for 20-plus years. And as the Biomed Modality Manager, I manage all of the Philips biomed modality with the quality and regulatory aspects of our program.
That's awesome. Second generation biomed. It's the first time I hear such a thing. Jason, you're up next.
Pleasure to be here. My name is Jason Byers. I'm president of True Asset. We're one of the few CMMS solutions that concentrates 100% on the healthcare industry. I have 23 years in this industry, and it's been good.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us today. Josh, you're up next.
My name is Josh Weatherford. I'm the biomed manager here at Fluke Biomedical. I took and passed the CBET this past November, so it's still a little fresh on me and enjoying the kind of new status that comes with it.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us today, Josh. Last but not least, ours truly from Fluke Health Solutions. Mike, you're up.
Yeah, Michael Rach, Director of Product Management here at Fluke Health Solutions. So I look after all the products in our Fluke Biomedical and RaySafe portfolios. And yeah, I've kind of spent about 6 years in the industry, grew up in Fluke Biomedical mostly in the hardware side. So I've managed a lot of our products there. And I've also had the opportunity to look after our new software product, 1QA. So really excited to be on screen with these panelists here and have a great conversation.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for all of our panelists for joining us today. And we want to make sure that today is as engaging and as informative for our audience as possible. So we thought about what would be a good way to engage our audience. And then we decided, why not put a poll question? That's our way to bring you into the discussion with us. So we would like to start today with this question for you. At your facility, how many work orders does each biomed technician have to perform on a monthly basis? We're giving you 30 seconds to answer, and I'll read the answer choices for you. You can select only one, okay? So option 1 is 0 to 500. The second option is 500 to 1,000 work orders. Option 3, 1,000 to 1,500. That sounds like a lot. Option D, 1,500 plus work orders a month. And the last option is, I don't know. I have way many more that I can count. So we're going to give you a few more seconds to answer. I can see the answers coming in. Let's take it a few more seconds before it closes. All I can say is that I don't get 1,000 emails. Sometimes it feels like it, but I don't get 1,000 to 1,500 emails on a monthly basis. Sometimes it feels like it, but I don't really. Collecting the responses.
And Michelle, are you ready to
Yeah,
close the poll? Okay,
please,
let's do
let's close the
it.
poll. I
Let's
think
do
we've given
it. Ah,
plenty of time. Okay, so 85% of our respondents said 0 to 500. 9% answered 500 to 1,000 work orders. 2% said they don't know. I get it, it's hard to count. And then 4% said 1,000 to 1,500. So the biggest majority answered 0 to 500 work orders on a monthly basis. I think it's a good time to start the conversation. I think I'll start with you, Josh. Does this answer of 0 to 500, does that align with your experience at Renew Medical?
Yeah, it does. So specifically here, we do, I would say the percentage of break fix versus just PMs would be pretty heavily weighted towards the break fix side. So if you're repairing every single order, you're going to do considerably less than 500 or 1,000 if you're actually replacing parts, testing those new parts. The higher volume you're going to see is just doing PMs on an equipment, preventive maintenance, running through the checklist, and just certifying it for the next year of use. You're going to see a lot less than that if you're actually going into the unit and doing hands-on.
Oops, I think I lost you for a second, Josh. I lost the first few, the last seconds of your answer. You said at the PM at the very end of the month.
Yeah, so the PM process is going to be quicker than having to do a repair, and then also the PM process to certify that repair. So that's going to really slow your time down when you're focusing more on break fix repairs, and as opposed to just preventive maintenance and just doing those PM inspections.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Jamie, would you agree? Is that similar to Philips Healthcare? Do you see the same amount, 0 to 500, or do you see more than that?
Yeah, it just depends on the account size and the volume and what we call our install base. But what really we look at here is the variety of work orders, right? What kind of work orders we seeing? 10 years ago we saw preventives and correctives. Now we have to see work orders ranging from all over scopes, right? Preventives, correctives, EMR challenges, financial challenges, projects that may occur. We see a lot more of that where the hospital leans more on the biomed department nowadays. So preventives and correctives is, that's just probably 50% of what our team is focused on. The other 50 just being, things all over the map.
Okay. And do you have a training strategy that will enable you and your teams to tackle these varieties of work orders?
We do. We have an onboarding process and then just a continual education. Philips, one of the things that I feel like we do very well is education. We just feel like the more that we can educate and the more we can pass down to our team, I feel like the better equipped we are and the better technician we have. So yeah, we have TEDS training, we have CMMS training, we have product training, we have just training all over just to help the everyday technician, be a little bit more equipped for the challenges that he may see.
Sounds like a very robust training. You touched on CMMS training, so I'd like to loop in maybe Jason a little bit into this conversation. Jason, I know that True Asset has training embedded into it. Can you talk a little bit about that?
We do. Training your technicians is obviously one of the most important things, and having a system that they're familiar with and can easily move through and complete their work. Because the last thing you want is your documentation to be the thing that slows you down. You should be documenting on the fly onto the next work order. One of the things we do at True Asset is that we offer free training. When you hire somebody new, we schedule you with one of our support staff and actually walk you through, set aside an hour, and we can set it up on your technician's schedule when they're starting and what's a convenient time for them, because they're also working through getting through all the onboarding process through the hospital or the ISO or whoever they're happen to be working with. So it's kind of a multi-stage, but training is very important.
Absolutely. Ben, is there something you would like to add there? Because you're preparing the techs in school to face this workload and this variety of work order equipment. How do you prepare them?
Absolutely. And I think one of the big things that I really appreciate hearing from all the other panelists, so I want to say thank you, is that emphasis on training and ongoing training. And that's one of the things that I really emphasize with the people that are transitioning into the biomed field, is that emphasis on ongoing training. And I heard this from Jamie, is biomeds have transitioned from just fixing equipment to solving problems. And that's one of the emphases, because it's not just fixing something that's broken. We have to look at the bigger scope. We have to look at why it's broken. It could be a training issue. It's not just that the equipment's not working. It could be something that something's not working because of the lack of understanding of the end user. And so we're looking at the bigger scope of the thing, of what's going on. And often hospitals are relying on biomeds to look at the greater problem, not just to replace a broken part. What happened? What's it? Is it a training issue? Is it a use issue? Is it just got broken? You know, so it's the biomeds need to have a greater understanding of the functionality, the use, and how does the equipment actually function. And so that's where the CMMS training, the Fluke Biomedical training, where can the new biomeds understand how to do they get their training and to understand how to solve the problem, not just fix the equipment. And that's one of the things I emphasize with their training coming into the industry.
Makes a lot of sense. I saw you shaking your head, Mike. Do you
Yeah,
want to
I'd love
plug
to
in
hop
a
in
few
here.
words? Yes, please.
Yeah, because at Fluke Biomedical, we try and kind of close this gap as well. We do it through a couple different ways. One is webinars like the one we're having today, right, to try and educate those that are just coming into the field, but also try and shed some new light to people that have been in the field for a little while. But you know, Ben touched on the trainings, right? We have an advantage training program, which is free and on demand, and that touches on exactly what he said, right? What is medical device quality assurance? Why should you test medical devices? What can go wrong? And then how to do it with our test equipment to make sure that people are best prepared. And we're trying to take that one step further, right? Because you have your senior techs and you have your junior techs. You want them all working at the same level and you want them all doing the same thing. So another opportunity that we're trying to build out here is through software to try and standardize those procedures. So do think about how you do that knowledge transfer from senior to junior. Think about how you get people up to speed. And yeah, software standardization is another way to think about that.
Awesome. Developing that critical thinking in the biomed. We got somebody from the audience said that sometimes it makes a big difference on what type of work order equipment is related. So it's important, and I'm glad to hear that we're talking about all this critical thinking through training, because the biomed job is not it's not an easy job. And we've been talking a little bit about training, but I think we kind of have to cover a little bit of the elephant in the room before training, right? The hiring process. And I would like to engage the audience one more time with another poll question. This is a very yes or no poll question, so we'll see where we land. But the question is hiring and retaining talent in your organization a pain point for you today? Wow, that's quick. That's a ooh,
Yeah,
feel
I'm
like this
pretty
40% of
sure
you
the
voted.
responses
Yeah,
are
I
coming
mean,
in, and it's going to be pretty surprising, or
is it?
not.
Or not, or not. I heard you say something there, Mike. Do you have like a gut feeling on what the answer is going to be? I'll put you on the spot.
I think that it'll be a problem. I think there's what I've heard when we reach out to customers is that, you know, we have some program closures and sourcing people, you know, trained people is a problem, and we're looking into other industries. So my vote would be yes.
You had a 50% chance of getting that right, and you got it right. Edna, you can probably close the poll.
Absolutely.
83% of our audience said that yes, it is a problem, and only 17% said no. I'd like to know who these 17% people are. Maybe you can leave a comment in the comment section so we can get a little bit more of your intel. But let's assume that the answers are 83%. So where are the technicians coming from today? And maybe, let me close this poll so I can see all of my panelists. There we go. Maybe, Ben, I have to tap into your educational hat again. And it's a pain point. Where are the new biomed technicians coming from today?
So I can answer two places. One is from the Department of Defense, and from the military, they're coming directly into either getting refreshed from the school or going directly into industry. I know Amy's doing a really good job with an apprenticeship program, but a lot of people just aren't aware of what biomed is. So a lot of people are trying to get in through the apprenticeship program, but the majority of the people that aren't coming from the military are coming through the schools. And unfortunately, people aren't hearing about the biomed program in the schools. The schools are doing a really good job recruiting, but there's just not enough people to meet the demand. I can tell you this past year, every one of my students on their internship was hired either before their internship and did their internship as a working internship, or got hired during their internship process. So every one of my students had a job in place before they graduated. And that was not common before. I mean, they usually spent a couple months after graduation looking for a job. Now, this 83% does not surprise me. I mean, if it was above 60, 70%, I was not surprised at all. Because of the numbers that we're seeing, there's so many people retiring, there's not enough people to fill those spots.
I was going to ask exactly that question. How are we going to balance? Because we hear the retiring biomeds, and maybe you can say a few words about that, Jamie. I would imagine Philips Healthcare has a good mix of new biomeds and more senior biomeds. How are you managing that transition, right, from the retiring biomeds and the knowledge transfer as well?
Yeah, good question. So when I sit down and look at this, as hiring and retaining your talent in your organization a pain point for you today? Me being a national manager, I kind of look at that question and I go, yep, in some places, absolutely, it's tough, you know. But then again, you got great little pockets like Texas, right? You have Texas that has a school, TSTC, man, they generate some really good quality, biomeds, and there's pockets of schools throughout, North America that generate good biomed students. But there's also some pockets that doesn't, so I think when we look at like our talent and we look at someone that's approaching the retirement age, or comes to us about retirement, the biggest thing is that knowledge transfer and the education. Going back to the education, what is our BMET retiring, what is his specialty, and what do we have to backfill and start looking at to be able to direct service on the business. So just looking at all aspects of the business, we really have to pay attention to. But yes, hiring talent is something that it can be difficult. And I will tell you, in some markets, we have to think outside of the box, right? We have great candidates that come to us with electronics experience, not necessarily medical electronics, but they know the technology industry and they know about service work orders. And then we have to take that applied knowledge and direct it towards the biomed profession. So that can be challenging, but that's the fun part of the business, right? Growing our staff, growing our team, educating our team, and making us better.
Yeah, absolutely. We got a comment from the audience saying that hiring and retaining may be two different things. Companies are putting a lot of work in hiring talent, but they are not doing a great job at retaining the talent that they already have. Probably a sign of the struggles to hire new people. Josh, I know you have quite a large operation there at Renew Medical. How are you managing that transition of the retiring and the new? do you have a good balance on your team? And maybe we can start with that question.
Most of our team is relatively young, around mid to upper 20s, low 30s. So we're not really facing the retirement, but we are experiencing some pretty rapid growth. So that does run into the issue of where you source the talent from. Some luck that we've had has been kind of alternate backgrounds. What Jamie was saying, relative experience. So my background is actually I had ASE master status as an auto tech, mechanic. So with that, you get electrical theory, you get, working with your hands, the way things come apart, go back together, work orders as well. So stuff like that, electricians, IT has been a field we've pulled a few guys from. So those are the things we found that work for us, and we can adapt their prior training to more of a biomed standard and really grow that. So that's what we've utilized in the past. Now we do have some prior, hospital biomeds and stuff on staff. So we've got a mix of it in that regard. We've also got a couple of military trained biomeds. So we've got the experience and also some of the background experience that can benefit from more of a biomed standpoint as well.
Awesome. Fantastic. You have a younger team and your background is definitely interesting. We had a comment from the section saying that they're in a small organization. He's the only biomed, but they might need to be hiring some help soon, some additional help. So I'm going to open this to the audience. Think about his scenario. He's in a small biomed. He's the only guy, and let's just say the work order. He's in that larger bucket of work orders. How can we provide this one biomed in a small shop with some advice on, one, how to convince his leadership that he needs help, and two, where a small biomed shop can go to hire the best talent out there? I'll leave it open to you, whoever wants to take it.
I think as far as convincing that he needs help, there's always the argument for excuse me, for quality standards. If you have one guy trying to do the work of 2 or 3, the quality's bound to slip. So that's something we can't have in this field with the nature of what we do. That's always the argument I would make first. Not so much that he's incapable of doing it, but more so that he doesn't feel that he can deliver the highest quality for what he's doing just because of the overload of work.
Absolutely. Ben?
One thing I did when I was supervising, and I'd take the hours of a work orders of similar work and look at the workload projection and just look at basic numbers. And that's one thing I would present to the C-suite, say, this is the number of hours that's available, this is what's the work available, and give them basic data. And requires a little more number crunching, but to give them the raw data of here's the work that's available, this is the work that needs to be done, this is the number of FTEs or full-time employees that we need to get the work done. That's really helpful for someone that's looking at how to move forward.
Absolutely. Is there a mandate or some sort of number that we can help with our audience? This many work orders, you should have this many biomeds. Is there a count, or is there based on the number of beds of the hospital? Is that based on the number of work orders? Is there a calculation that we can provide to our audience?
Unfortunately, no. And I will tell you, sometimes the beds calculation, that there's beds don't work, because if you look at like your medical laboratories, how many beds are in a laboratory? How many beds are in a rehab? How many beds are in the surgery suite? There's one table in a surgery suite, but look at how much equipment is in the surgery suite versus how much money is in the surgery suite. You need multiple biomeds for a 2 to 3 surgery rooms versus you need one biomed for a couple regular outpatient rooms. Those numbers are completely different. So talk money versus the number of money versus equipment versus, and jump in here. You should be looking at like 10 to 20% of the cost of the equipment. And gentlemen, please help me out here with the numbers. I'm just giving rough numbers. But let's say roughly 10 to 20% of the initial cost of the equipment to support the equipment over the lifetime or each year. So
Yeah,
if you're not, go ahead.
And Ben, that's kind of what I was thinking as well. You know, I I have been told many a time throughout my 20 career, it used to be like the flagship was the 1,000 to 1,500 piece per count per technician. And you know what we're seeing in Philips is that's just not accurate anymore. I think that PMs take longer nowadays. So what we do at Philips is we capture in our database, we capture estimated PM times. And what we can do now, we can take a customer's new install base, take that inventory, run it through our analytics program and say, okay, based on your inventory, we have about an estimated time of how long it'll take us to do the work based on the man hours that we'll need to do the work. Because as Ben was saying, you know, install base is what we learned. Certain customers, like we found, you know, you may have a small little clinic that has just a handful of physical therapy, but yet they have 12 to 15 ventilators. That's a whole different, you know, service delivery platform when it comes to like low complexity stuff based high complexity stuff that takes a long time to complete service. So yeah, I think that rule has changed nowadays. And to be honest with you, I don't think the market has a standard number anymore, right? I think that every new piece of business or existing piece of business has to be evaluated and look at your manpower.
Exactly, and it needs to be recalibrated on a regular basis because you may say, well, we believe that this particular PM takes 1 hour. Well, after you've done it for a year or two, you should be able to look at your past work orders and tell what it has taken in the past in order to recalibrate so you can make those future projections properly. I mean, your biomeds almost need to be data analysts these days because of all the information that's out there. Just another one of those hats you're wearing around.
Wow.
Yeah, and another thing I'd say is, you know, you can even, you know, yes, there is a learning curve, right? So your senior guys are going to work faster than your junior guys, but technology also kind of evolves over time as well. So are you using different equipment or a different procedure or AEMs? All of those things do have an influence on how long each of those, you know, preventive maintenance procedures takes to complete.
Wow. I feel like this is a perfect segue to our next poll question. Edna, if you could please put the next poll up, because we talked a little bit about the differences between a more experienced to a less experienced biomed. So I have a question for the audience. How long does it take a newly hired biomed Tech 1 to get up and running? How long does it take? And you can only select one again. Does it take 30 days, 90 days? Oh, the answers are coming in. 180 days or over a year? How long does it take? Let's give it a few more seconds because the answers are changing and we only have 50% of you who voted. So I'll give you a couple more seconds while I skim through the comments from the audience. I think we're good. I think we're good. We got up to 60% of voters, so I think we can close.
We can close it now. Absolutely. The poll is
Yes.
closing, and I'll share the result.
Awesome. So 35% said that it takes 90 days. That's fast. 6% said it takes 30 days. 29% said it takes 180 days. And 29% said it takes over a year. So the answers are quite balanced if you think about it. Not quite statistically balanced, but it's close. Why do we think there is such a discrepancy in answers? Does anyone from the panel would like to say why do you think there is such a discrepancy in the answers?
I'll take a stab. Oh, go ahead.
For it.
Well, my stab is just at, you know, there are organizations that are going to be more standardized, right? And there are going to be organizations that are less. So, you know, Philips might have very clear, you know, statements of work and how to do each thing because they've had so many techs go through that program that we have it. Whereas the one-man biomed shop, you know, if he chose to retire, it's going to be a big learning curve for them. So I think, you know, one of my stabs in the dark would be, yeah, I think just how defined the work is really makes a difference. So do you have it step by step? Do you have all the tips and tricks in there? The more that's defined and written down, codified, the easier it's going to be to get someone up to speed.
And I would second that, Mike, and also the diversity of the equipment you're supporting. And if you have a very narrow scope of equipment, I think you'll be able to get onboarded more quickly and have that level of support. But if you have a wide range of equipment that you're supporting, that's going to take a little longer. And also the regions you're supporting. If you have a field service and you're supporting like a city or a state, you're going to have a little more time for onboarding versus a specific hospital.
Yes, a member from the audience said that it depends also on the ability of the technician. This person has seen technicians with a bachelor's degree to be up and running in 90 days. And they have seen others with no experience at all, and that takes up to a year. So seems like we're spot on. Jason, Josh, Jamie, do you have anything else to add on this topic?
I would second just kind of what everyone else has said. It's going to vastly depend on, number one, what you have them doing, and then also the size of your facility plays a part in it too. If you hire someone into a massive hospital where they have to learn the floors, they have to learn the rooms, you know, where everything would be located, versus say like here in a depot, we have everything it's pretty linear. There's not a lot of rooms to find or anything. We have a biomed area, and that's pretty much the extent of what they need to know. So here they can focus on just learning the equipment and the job tasks they're required to do without also compounding on their learning the facility as well.
Yeah.
And I do want to echo the a member that says, given their background, because as an educator, I have people that are coming in and they have no mechanical background, no electrical background, and they really work hard to come into the industry. And by the time they're leaving, they are at a place where I feel comfortable to go out in the hospitals. But at the same time, people that have some kind of mechanical background or some kind of electrical background, they really take to it a lot easier. So they do have that up ramp, so if they coming from an industry such as an electrician, construction mechanic, they really do have a better on ramp. But I've had people with chemistry backgrounds that have had a hard time putting a nut on a screw. And I'm like, okay, we're going to work on this. And so
I feel triggered, Ben. I'm a chemist. I feel triggered.
it's a specific, not you. It was a specific student, but actually they're really good now, and they're a fantastic biomed. So
I just joking around. I don't think I know a difference from a Phillips to a hammer. I don't know. We had a comment from the audience saying that it also depends on the training and support from the other biomeds working at the facility. I don't think we talked much about that. Can you speak a little bit about that cultural element of a biomed shop that will help perhaps a new incomer get up to speed a little faster?
So I'll take this one because this is something I really emphasize in the classroom. Is I switch my classroom to a shop, and I emphasize the phrase "same team." I want them to look things up in the manual. I want them to look things up on the internet. I want them to work with each other. And in my lower level classes, the AC and DC classes, I'm like, yeah, talk to me. I'm here to help you. But when they get to the biomed classes, I'm their manager. The TA is the supervisor or lead. I'm like, you guys need to work with each other. You're the team. I want you to share each other's ideas. If you've done this lab before, help someone else. If you haven't done this lab before, go talk to someone else that has done this lab. Do not come talk to me unless you've exhausted all of it. I'm your manager. Do not come talk to your manager unless you have exhausted, because I'm doing everything else to support you to do your job. But when you come talk to me, I want you to work with the rest of the team. And that's the environment I want as a shop, and have it be a team environment. So I want the new technicians to be willing to go ask questions and look for answers before they come talk to their manager. And so that team's approach is so key in the biomed environment. I'm
But
curious
Ben,
what
what you're not able to simulate is, having a more experienced guy in the shop as well. How do those guys react to the new guy coming in? Do they want to train that person?
And so typically what I do is I have someone that has gone through the program that's working in industry come back at TA. So I have that person be the lead or supervisor, be there and help once they have, like, what have you done? What have you done? Okay, let me show you this. So usually I have someone that's currently working in industry come back and be a lab assistant. So I have that most of the time to be that senior person.
Yeah, because
and
onboarding
bringing
takes time, right?
having that camaraderie and that teamwork in your shop is going to help you retain employees too. So that's back to that whole retention that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, and
I
I'd like to
agree.
go ahead.
Please, no, floor is yours, Jamie.
I'd like to turn the page and see, and tell you something, about how we see it on the other side sometimes. Sometimes that legacy knowledge that gets passed down from people is not right. So we have to be careful with that whole, what we like to do when we get new business, we like to really focus on the Phillips program, because what I've learned over the past, 10 years of onboarding is that if you don't onboard our employees correctly, the legacy knowledge that they have, they carry with them, right? So that means, how do you approach could not locate? If you approach a could not locate the way that you used to, some people just leave them open, right? Which with Phillips, that's a non-compliant. So I do like the team aspect, but I make sure the team knows the entire program before we pass that on. But yes, absolutely, the one-on-one is good, but I've seen challenges with that plan as well. What do you think?
Anyone?
I'll jump in. I mean, how do you manage that knowledge transfer? How do you manage that it's the correct information, right? I think there's a lot of sharing that can go on through word of mouth and show and tell. But going back to my comment about codifying it, writing it down, making sure that everyone's following the same procedure by the book, and that you're referencing the book year after year, just to make sure that the book hasn't changed. Just making sure that you have like a standard of reference is really important here. Because the way the old guys do it isn't necessarily how you should be doing it. But just making sure that what you're doing is compliant and that it's locked in, right? And everybody's following it.
That's right.
I think
And we see challenges, from one organization to another, right? You get a new employee that comes from a different, biomed organization, and they had a way of doing things. Now they come to a new organization. It's all that has to be relearned and retaught.
And I think
yes,
one of the
and
you're saying, Jamie, is that onboarding process, and to Mike's point, is documentation. And that's one thing I really try to emphasize within the classroom is read that documentation, read the manual, and I try to set forth with the syllabus is that onboarding process of clear expectations, having the technicians or the students expect those and ask for those documentation. But I personally, from my industry background, having a really good onboarding process, and I think this is to your point, Jamie, is key. Otherwise, they're going to do what they thought they were doing. They're going to try their best and they're going to do the right thing. And the right thing was what they thought was they were doing it the last time. But if going into a new industry or a new facility, having that good documentation and the good onboarding, it is crucial.
It's a way to drive culture as well at the end of the day.
yes, and I think we covered several points here. We covered the onboarding, we covered the hiring, we covered the onboarding, we've covered the recurrent training, but we haven't covered much yet of technology. Is there a role that technology can play in all of this standardization, in all of this documentation? Maybe Jason, maybe you can say a word or two there.
Well, technology is advancing every day, and we get better and better data sets and better information out there about what's moving forward. Integrations with your CMMS Integrating, as an example, with Fluke's One QA, having a standardized set of procedures, having those integrated with your test equipment, so that they can automatically run, integrating with things like the FDA, so you can walk up when you get new equipment in, scan the back of it. It pulls down serial number, model number, manufacturer. It fills in almost all the details for you. So it takes away the better chances of errors taking place with the technician and simplifies it. It's the way of the future. These systems are as more and more data is made available to us, we need to be integrating more and more in order to pull that information in and eliminate some of the human factor.
Absolutely. Josh, would you have something to say about it there? I know you have a lot of experience with One QA, and I know you're a process guy. Is there something you would like to add there for us?
Yeah, probably my favorite thing about One QA is just and this can kind of echo back to the senior techs. If you have some of them either create tests or input information for the test, you can actually create informative steps in your testing process that will tell you what to set up to run the test, also things that you can look for, things that may not be specified in the manual that are just noted after repetitive testing of it, or things you kind of come across. So with things like that, it really helps to have that standard testing procedure. It helps to have all of your newer technicians run the exact same test method as your older technicians. Keeps everybody on the same page. And it's just a wonderful way to have that standard. You can actually have a standard and measure it by everyone using the same procedure and everyone running the exact same test.
Everybody is playing from the same sheet of music, sounds like. Mike, would you like to add a little bit about how Fluke is approaching technology going forward with One QA and also besides One QA?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Jason and Josh both hit on two really important points with integrating with other parts, other technology solutions, as well as standardization. But there's also, a reporting piece to it, right? So how can you make sure that you're getting all the results that you need? How do you make sure that you're not skipping steps? How do you make sure it's archived in the case of an audit? So reporting, just report generation, making that faster, but also report archival are two big things that One QA addresses. But there's also, automation solutions. We talked about how much work or how many work orders biomed technicians need to do on a monthly basis. How can we make them more efficient? So whether that's through, automated or semi-automated hardware, right? So on the product itself, or using software with your hardware to take over, telling it what to do and pulling those results. Both of those can help with efficiency and productivity. So yeah, think about what test equipment can help you both from a hardware and a software side. And in the case of it being conjoined, one solution, that might take it to the next level.
Absolutely. We have some comments from the audience. They are saying technology is the way of the future. Insurance patient safety, ultimately, right? Outside of the work orders that you have to go through in a month. And it helps apply the risk factors criteria to prioritize the equipment PM and repairs as well. We're coming up on time. I will keep the conversation going for another 4 minutes, but I just wanted to share with the audience that I know there are a lot of problems going on in the biomed shop. We covered extensively hiring, retaining, technology, but is there something else that we didn't cover? Leave it in the comments section and we will cover in a couple more minutes. But is there, let me think of a question that I can ask the panelists. We talked a lot about, there we go. Let me get a question that we came through the audience. No, let me take this one. Like I said, we covered a lot of problems in the biomed shop. Is there a problem that we didn't cover today that the panelists would like to discuss? And if you have a suggestion on how to fix it, beyond hiring, retaining, technology, is there something that we didn't cover today?
I think there's one that Josh didn't bring up, but finding the device that you need to test. Huge pain point, right? Especially with infusion pumps. But real-time location services is another solution that's out there. Josh, you want to touch on that real quick and how you guys have been using it?
Yeah, so especially with our field techs, because primarily here we're just focused in depot, but when the field techs go out, they're, one of the challenges is always going to be locating things. And when you're on site, if the customers aren't, walking you through everything or have everything set up for you to run through, you're essentially just going through room to room. We all know that some things have a habit of finding a closet and staying there. So it's one of the big challenges is locating everything, and someone else may be able to speak to more of a hospital sense, but as far as clinics we see and things like that, it's definitely a check everything, and once you get it recorded, it's easier next time, but that initial struggle is finding every asset. But I do like with OneQA that you can, once you find the assets, you can actually put where they are, where they're located, and then the next time you go back, you can actually refer to that. And as long as no one's misplaced it or moved it, you can actually pull that location, go right to it, and do your testing on it.
Interesting. Do you see the same issues going on across Philips, Jamie, on locating assets, or you don't see that as much? Given your
Everybody's
work?
seen that in biomed.
Okay,
I
okay.
always, the last week of the biomed month, everybody has to really get out and work, right? We have with Philips over 145 plus accounts, right? And to be honest with you, I'm actively involved with only one RTLS project right now, and the hospital's got 17,000 assets, right? So what does that mean? That means the majority of our customers don't have the funding to really put in that type of technology, because a lot of times it helps, but what I have seen the most is COVID. COVID has really changed the industry when it comes from items being in use and then items being moved all around. We have IDNs that have moved equipment from California all the way to New York just to cover install bases and the needs of patients. So what we really focus on right now is you have to make sure that you code everything accordingly and you follow that all the way to completion, because our job as a clinical engineering program is to make sure that we minimize risk. Any kind of risk that is PM that is not done, our job is to track it and complete it all the way to completion. And that's a collaboration that happens with the customer.
Awesome. Awesome. We have a few questions coming from the audience. The topics are not necessarily related, but there was one question: is automated test equipment coming up in the future? Have you guys seen anything about it? I don't know. I don't know the answer.
Can you repeat
Automated test equipment. Is there
Automated.
something?
Maybe I'll kick it
Absolutely.
off because we have a couple things in the portfolio and you guys can add some more. But we have your typical push button, manual, I want ohms, I'm going to push ohms test equipment. But we also have, auto sequences and even, automated processes on board test equipment. And we'll take that one step further in just a little bit of time here. But yeah, that's one way to automate is on board the device itself. And the second way that we're doing it is through software. So you can take a PC, plug it into your piece of test equipment, and it will take over control as well as running the test and pulling the results. So those are two ways that we kind of automate the test equipment space, at least in the realm we control.
And so I am really impressed with a lot of the automation that's coming out. The one thing, especially with the newer technicians, that I do have a reservation about is when they don't understand what's being automated, they trust the machines and they hook it up. And when they don't hook it up correctly, and they go through and they go, okay, this passed or this failed, and they don't look at the numbers and they go, okay, what does this mean? So a lot of times, especially when stuff's getting coming out that's newly automated and doesn't do all the checks, and sometimes it's like, okay, this looks good, but they hooked it up wrong, so they're getting false positives. And so you have to have a level of understanding or a level of expertise to be able to say, I hooked this up correctly. Now, I've worked with Fluke on a lot of the stuff with building up some of this automation, and they're getting really good to make sure it's getting hooked up correctly and it's testing the stuff. But there's a level of that human understanding before the automation takes place that needs to happen. So this comes back to Jamie's with the onboarding and that training. You have to understand what's being automated and how it's being hooked up before that automation can be successful. So you have to have that level of expertise before that automation can take place. So that's that dual-edged sword. The automation can make things go faster and smoother and make those reports generation be more timely, be more effective and efficient. But if that's not being done correctly, it can also give false positives.
You got to
Got
tell them
it.
how, right? And I think Josh was alluding to that with the pictures, the tips, and the tricks. You know, build it in, show them how, tell them how.
That could also, kind of to echo what Ben was saying, also affect the long-term learning and holding of that information. So you could put things like that in the informative steps, like say for instance, if you're testing a defib, you want to test it at 50 ohms for thoracic impedance. If you have automation though, you're not going to see that the analyzer is setting itself to 50 ohms, you know, whereas like the ESUs are a good example too. You know, what ohm resistance do you set it to test cut, coag, you know, different settings like that that could potentially be CBET questions in the future for anyone that enters the field and, you know, has that aspiration to take CBET. Things like that if you're manually setting over and over or seeing in that infographic tip, you're gonna withhold that. You're gonna hold that information longer than you would if you're just clicking start and it auto starts it to run. So that information is a good tip to have in there. Even if the automation is there, it just strengthens the biomed to see that information every time.
Any more comments on that topic? Because I have another question going back to hiring. Maybe you can take this one, Jamie, because you've alluded to operations across the US. Question from the audience is, everybody else can jump in, obviously. How do you determine fair pay across the board for different states? That's a tricky one.
That's a tough one. I'm going to have to get you in touch with HR. No, we see that, you know, and that's and not just across the state. How do you determine from one biomed 3 to another biomed 3? Does one biomed 3 exempt leadership qualities where another one doesn't, right? So I think that fair pay across, you know, all 4 zones, which we have a east, a west, and, you know, Midwest and a south, but you know, just looking at the application, I do think we have a national scale, right? And then Philips is very, you know, very committed to fair pay and paying everybody on the national scale, but promoting within, right? Or promoting within. And we also, one of the topics that senior leadership is we've just approached a lot is path to promotion. What does that look like, right? What you never want to do is hire a biomed 1 and make them feel they'll sit in that chair forever, because that's not what all of us did to get to leadership, right? And that's just having that path of promotion and a clear expectation of giving somebody a path for the next position for an increase of pay. Because let's just face it, we all want more money, right?
We do. Would anybody disagree with that on the panel? I don't think so, right? I don't think so. Anybody else want to take that question? Leave Jamie in the hot seat by himself? I'll jump.
I'll leave him there.
Yeah, leave him there, right? I have one question, and maybe you can take this one first, Jason. And depending on how we go, we might close with this one. But in reflecting on the evolution of the biomed shop, what do you see as the most significant change that occurred in the past decade, and how do you think it will influence the future of the field?
Most influential change in the last decade. Wow, you threw me a softball, didn't you?
I did. Jamie's feeling better now. Somebody else can help if anybody else wants to jump in and help.
You own the answer to that solution, Jason. Database.
Well, I agree. You know, not to toot my own horn, but you know, I'd say that advances in technology and CMMS solutions have really kind of changed the whole industry. You know, 23 years ago, you know, that I came on board with an ISO, and we were using they were using an old DOS-based application, and they were mailing in floppy disks. Well, you know, that doesn't seem that long ago, but from a technology standpoint, that was ages. I came in and rewrote the application and has modified into what True Asset is today, and you know, simplified that whole process. Rather than mailing floppy disks back and forth, we actually have instantaneous data. Technicians are carrying around, you know, tablets, and they're able to do their information right then and there. So you know, in the past, you would go out and you do all your work orders, you do them on paper, then you go back to computer and you'd sit for a couple hours, and you'd spend all this time in front of a PC trying to get all your paperwork caught up. Well, now you can walk right up to the piece of equipment and you can do the paperwork while the tests are running. You can start entering data and validating and closing that out. So you're not spending as much time. You're able to get more done and not sitting in front of a PC as often. So I have to say that you know, the advancements, computers becoming more integrated in with equipment, with test equipment, the better CMMS applications that can now give those results. You know, we talked about recalibrating, you know, your PM times. Now I can look at the entire year. I can see where my heavy loads are, where my man hours are going to be the most required. And of course, you always have to take into repairs that are unexpected into that. But balancing that out, so I can say, okay, I've got, you know, 100 work orders in December, but I've got, you know, 1,000 in February. Well, February is a short month. You know, how can we balance some of that out? And not only looking at the number of PMs, because obviously we've talked about this, that a sterilizer PM is going to take 4 hours, an anesthesia unit is going to potentially take 4 hours, while a thermometer is going to take you 15 minutes. So there's a big variance in the number of labor hours required to get those two different work orders taken care of, and being able to forecast for the future and what type of labor hours you're going to need. You may only have 500 work orders for next month, but the labor hours could require twice as much as the 1,000 you have the following month. So being able to assess that properly is huge. These are things we couldn't do in the past, not without lots of Excel sheets or lots of time on paper.
I completely agree with you. The one thing I would say that's a little higher than that would be the amount of regulations that we can and cannot do. And I think Jason's absolutely right, and I think Jamie said it, is the technology is the solution to all the regulations that we're facing, because we're facing more and more scrutiny of what we can and cannot do. The discussion around right to repair is a really good example of that. But I think Jason is absolutely right. The technology, and your explanation of it is spot on, is the technology is the solution to that.
And also, since we're dealing with so many different organizations out there, some of them use DNV, some of them use Joint Commission, some of them are just state regulated. So we've had to write our application to fit all of them and to be within the limits of all of them, so that no matter who you're signed up with or what organization you're utilizing, you're still within the regulatory requirements. So it's been huge. And some, you know, Joint Commission comes out and says, oh, we want to start monitoring alarms now and coming up with processes for that. And you have to be able to pivot. Your application you're using has to be able to pivot in order to build in those types of supports and things. And it's just incredibly important these days.
Awesome. This was a great closing statement. I'm not going to try to attempt to say anything smarter than that. I'll take a minute to thank each one of our panelists, Jason, Josh, Jamie, Ben, and Mike. Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you to our audience for being so engaging. I saw a lot of comments. I tried to snag and say a few. And thank you so much. We will catch you next time. Edna, any final words?
Thanks, Michelle. And as you mentioned, to you, Michelle, thanks for being a wonderful moderator. You did a fantastic job. To the panelists, lots of information. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, your knowledge. I myself is just overwhelmed, so thank you. And to the audience, thank you for your time and your engagement in our poll questions. I do want to just remind everyone, this will conclude today's webinar.